Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Dinopati Jalal, Chairman and Founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, the largest foreign policy group in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. Today is a great day, a blessed day for all of us because we get to welcome Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia, Marise Payne, who's joining us here today. Hi, Marise, how are you? Welcome to Indonesia, and I hope you've had a good meeting. Minister Marise Payne is in Indonesia with the Minister for Defense, Peter Dutton, in the course of doing a 2+2 ministerial meeting with their counterparts, Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi and Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto. And I trust you had a very good meeting today, and thank you for speaking with us today. We've had Marise on the screen, a number of ambassadors, government officials, journalists, a lot of students, policy experts, academia, and the general public. And despite the short notice for the speech, we only announced it yesterday. There's over 1,000 people who have registered. So I think that should say a lot about how much you are welcome in Indonesia and how much do Indonesians want to hear from you. Let me, before giving the floor to Foreign Minister, read her CV. Foreign Minister Marise Payne has been joining the Liberal Party since 1982. And she was actually the first female president of the Young Liberals. In 1997, until the present time, she became a senator for New South Wales. And 2013, she became a Minister for Human Services. 2015, she was Minister for Defense. I think I had the pleasure to meet you several times. And then 2018, she became Minister for Foreign Affairs. And 2019, to the present also, she became Minister for Women. So it's really a long and distinguished career, and she's now the #1 diplomat for Australia. And she has been at the forefront of strengthening the partnership between Indonesia and Australia. But before we begin, I would like to just give her a pantun. Pantun is the Indonesian version of rap. This is centuries old, Marise. And in fact, UNESCO has acknowledged pantun to be Indonesia's intangible cultural heritage, right? So we are, let me read you one pantun in English. Usually it's done in Indonesian, but this time I'm going to read it in English in your honor. I went to the market to buy a new vest. I didn't get far because of the rain. This afternoon, Indonesia is blessed to finally have with us Marise Payne. Good. Let's have another one. I went to Bali last holiday. I took a train and boarded a plane. I thank you for joining us today. We are very happy to have you, Marise Payne. All right. So, Minister, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. Minister will speak about Indonesia and Australia cooperation in the context of advancing the Indo-Pacific. Foreign Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, Dino, I'm not sure I want to give the floor up. I want to hear more pantun from you. I think for those of us with some Irish heritage, perhaps the pantun is the equivalent of the limerick. But I think the pantun sounds much better than most limericks I've heard in my time. Can I begin by saying how delighted I am to join everyone this afternoon from the Australian Embassy here in Jakarta for a discussion on the strong partnership between our two countries and our work together in the Indo-Pacific. Dino, I know you said there were some ambassadors, diplomats and journalists and others online. I can already see some familiar faces who served for Indonesia in Canberra over time, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. And of course, some faces of Australian diplomats who also appeared to be online, so let me acknowledge them as well. I really want to thank the foreign policy community of Indonesia for hosting this virtual forum. So to you, Dino, and your team, thank you very much for this opportunity. And can I particularly congratulate you on the work of FPCI. It is renowned, it is highly regarded, and I'm honoured to have an opportunity to contribute. I'm also really grateful, if I may say, to the Indonesian government for such a warm welcome during our visit here today. As Dino said, Minister for Defence Peter Dutton and I have held our 2+2 with Ministers Retno Marsudi and Prabowo Subianto today. Australia and Indonesia have held 7 2+2s since, I think, 2012. Retno Marsudi and I have been at 5 of those in my 2 incarnations and in her role as Foreign Minister. So it is an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to participate again, and today to also address Indonesia's foreign policy and security community, as I've previously done here in my former role as Defence Minister when I spoke at National Resilience Institute Lemhanas just a few years ago now. There's more to talk about now than there was then. It's a very dynamic environment in which we find ourselves. And having had the opportunity to meet today with my very good friends and colleagues, as I said, Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi, also this afternoon with Minister Bintang, the Minister of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection. A couple of things we have noted include the fact that it is so good to be able to meet face-to-face again. The virtual format has a lot to be said for it. But I know those of you in the virtual room who are diplomats, those of you in the virtual room who understand the power and the strength of people-to-people relationships, absolutely know that the opportunity to be here in person means a great deal. So thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, Australia and Indonesia are natural partners. We're partners by virtue of our geography, sharing the world's longest maritime border. We're partners on account of our shared histories, woven through generations, reaching back to the earliest days of trade between Makassar and Australia's Indigenous peoples, through to the dawn of Indonesian independence. Our partnership has flourished as our countries achieved greater prosperity, propelled by our growing economies, trade and engagement. And in August 2018, our President and Prime Minister, respectively, agreed to elevate the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Importantly, we have also found strength and solace, each of us in our partnership, in times of great adversity, through financial crises, through terrorist attacks, through devastating natural disasters, including Australia's bushfires last year, when Indonesia sent 2 TNI platoons of around 60 engineers to help Operation Bushfire Assist. And our partnership has grown, particularly through our deep community and personal ties, including through the bustling exchanges of tourism, students, business, diaspora and culture. Australia and Indonesia have forged a close and enduring partnership that will hold us in good stead as we look ahead to the many challenges and opportunities our countries face. Importantly, this partnership also affords us the strongest possible base from which we can continue to grow and support the health, prosperity, security and stability of our Indo-Pacific region. Today, I'll talk about these 2 points. I'll take stock of how our partnership is developing and evolving, and talk about our work towards realising a strong future for our region. Firstly, I think it is important to recognise both the magnitude of change and the lasting impacts brought about by COVID-19 on both of our countries and on our region. The health, humanitarian, and economic impacts on Indonesian communities have been devastating. The virus has profoundly affected our communities and our ways of life. Across the Indo-Pacific, health systems have been put under extraordinary strain. Lives have been lost. Livelihoods have been disrupted. Communities and families have been separated, and economies have been damaged. COVID-19 is a powerful reminder that our countries and the well-being of our peoples are deeply interwoven. Our region relies on and benefits from a healthy, prosperous and resilient Indonesia. That's why Australia has been proud to work in partnership with Indonesia, our close friend and neighbour, to address this pandemic. Through our partnership, Australia has already shared 1 million AstraZeneca doses with Indonesia as part of our commitment to share 2.5 million vaccine doses in 2021, as Minister Marsudi and I announced on the 7th of July. These doses, together with Australian support of $107 million for vaccine procurement, will see approximately 13 million vaccine doses delivered to Indonesia. And in addition, through our partnership, we'll work with a range of NGOs, UN agencies, community organisations and provincial governments in Indonesia to support their response to COVID-19 with a focus on the needs of local communities and health systems. This expanded cooperation builds on other commitments I announced also in July of oxygen-related and other medical equipment, over 40,000 rapid antigen test kits, of which 1,000 ventilators, 700 concentrators and 20,000 test kits have already been delivered. During a crisis in which timeliness of support is crucial, we have been able to partner with you to deliver the health support announced on the 7th of July, as I said, following my discussion with Foreign Minister Marsudi. Our partnership also enabled the rapid pivot of our development program in the early days of the pandemic, so that it was responding to Indonesia's immediate health, humanitarian and economic priorities. And we've accelerated and scaled new partnerships in health security and in crisis management, both announced during President Widodo's visit to Australia in February of 2020. For example, our partnership in disaster risk management program is helping to contain the spread of the virus, implement public health awareness campaigns, supply essential goods, help businesses to identify new opportunities and to improve food security. It has also focused on the most vulnerable groups in our community, including women and girls, people with disabilities and the poor. For its part, Indonesia is also playing a key role in the region's recovery. And I would like to particularly recognise Foreign Minister Marsudi as co-chair of the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, or AMC, engagement group. AMC has raised nearly $10 billion US to vaccinate almost 30% of the adult population in AMC countries by mid-2022, including over 171 million people in our own region. Since the start of this year, it has distributed over 49 million vaccine doses to Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Australia's partnership with Indonesia is emblematic of the strength of our friendship, but it also speaks to a broader recognition that Indonesia occupies a special place in our region, a place of leadership, economic opportunity and strategic importance. And Australia, like so many countries, has a very real interest in seeing Indonesia succeed. I want to emphasise just how strongly Indonesia figures in Australia's thinking as an emerging economic giant who is also a friend, a neighbour with whom we have many aligned interests, many shared values and an enormous potential for further expanding ties. The pandemic has also served as a timely reminder of the value of cooperation and openness in our region, and reinforce the importance of working together to achieve the kind of region in which we want to live. Just as viruses and variants in any one country can impact the health security of our whole region, so too can instability, insecurity, or economic recession cross borders. Australia and Indonesia are so fortunate to call the Indo-Pacific home. We live in the most dynamic, innovative, and prosperous region in the world. Our region is also in a period of strategic competition, and the active participation of countries like Australia and Indonesia is important, not only to advocate and defend the interests of our own countries, but also to protect and advance the interests of our region as a whole. Australia wants to see an Indo-Pacific region that embraces engagement and cooperation over coercion, that upholds the rights and sovereignty of countries, regardless of their size or power. We want to live in a region that empowers all countries, big and small, to engage and to prosper in an open, inclusive, and rules-based environment. A region that supports a level playing field based on international laws and norms to guide healthy competition and ensure that competition does not lead to conflict or instability. And a region that works together to bolster resilience so we can together foster new opportunities and deal with challenges like COVID-19 as they emerge. Australia's vision for the future of our region has ASEAN at its centre. It's principally a shared vision underpinned by shared principles. ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific, of which Indonesia has been a leading proponent, resonates strongly with our own Indo-Pacific vision, including principles of ASEAN centrality, openness, transparency, inclusivity, and a rules-based region. We discussed these principles last month when we held the ASEAN-Australia Post-Ministerial Conference, the East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers meeting, and the ASEAN Regional Forum Foreign Ministers meeting. Australia strongly believes that these principles enshrined in the ASEAN Outlook should guide the post-pandemic order in the region. And in support of the Outlook, Australia is committed to concrete cooperation under the 4 areas that it outlines: maritime, connectivity, the SDGs, and economic development. Australia's vision seeks to provide positive and practical choices for countries in our neighbourhood. Australia and Indonesia are working together with our international and ASEAN partners to achieve this. Southeast Asia is central to this regional vision, and Southeast Asia and ASEAN are the fulcrum of Australia's Indo-Pacific approach, which is why Australia is finding new opportunities to engage with Southeast Asia, including through ASEAN. We're working with partners to implement major new initiatives across Southeast Asia, which the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, and I announced last year. Together, we will deliver on tangible, targeted, sustainable, and effective programs that are tailored to meet the needs of local communities and implemented in partnership with local governments and organisations, including, for example, support for sustainable and high-quality infrastructure, scholarships and training to build the capacity of the people of the Mekong sub-region, sharing technical knowledge to strengthen trade and investment across the region, working to bolster environmental sustainability, respond to climate change, improve water security, and to combat marine pollution. We have also enhanced support to ASEAN initiatives in response to the pandemic, including ASEAN's recovery framework, its own roadmap out of the pandemic, and to the establishment of an ASEAN Centre for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases. Together and individually, these initiatives will make a real difference to our region's response to and recovery from the pandemic. We believe that engaging with ASEAN and supporting our partners in Southeast Asia is one of the best investments Australia can make in a stronger, more prosperous and more secure future for our region. The same is true, ladies and gentlemen, of our partnership with Indonesia, which Prime Minister Morrison and I, along with our entire Cabinet and government colleagues, are committed to expanding. In an increasingly interconnected and fast-paced world in which trends and developments, both positive and negative, have been accelerated and exacerbated by COVID-19, our partnership positions us well to both seize opportunities and tackle future global challenges together. We are increasing our cooperation in both minilateral and regional groupings, including the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or IORA. As two Indo-Pacific nations whose territories face both oceans, it's only natural for Australia and Indonesia to be leading voices in this space. We continue to expand our cooperation to address constantly evolving regional threats, including maritime and marine resource security, countering the threat of terrorism, emerging cyber and critical technology challenges, and dealing with emerging threats to our security, including from disinformation. One of our most important areas of cooperation over the coming years will be in addressing climate change. We are expanding our green energy cooperation to meet the challenge of our changing climate, and we're working together, along with international partners, on the global effort towards green economies, decarbonisation and green hydrogen. Australia is a good partner for the supercharging of Indonesia's digital economy, the rise of Indonesian unicorns, the rapid emergence of digital proficiency. We can also do more together to secure essential supply chains, including for the critical minerals needed to expand Indonesia's high-tech manufacturing. Research and development is central to our ability to innovate, to enable change, and to seize these opportunities. We can therefore build on work by leading Australian and Indonesian universities and institutions, such as between the CSIRO and Indonesia's Eichmann Institute on vaccine platform development. And of course, a cornerstone of our relationship is our strong economic ties. Indonesia is becoming economically more important both to Australia and to the region. You are a $1 trillion economy and one of the world's fastest growing consumer markets. Within a generation, Indonesia will be the world's 4th or 5th largest economy. So Indonesia presents huge economic opportunities, and we are committed to helping realise these. 1 year on from entry into force, the IA-CEPA, our bilateral comprehensive economic partnership agreement, provides the foundation for enhanced economic cooperation and enabling the growth of alternative market options. We're looking to reinvigorate business and community links as we recover from COVID-19, getting Indonesian students back to Australia, Australian tourists back to Indonesia, and business connecting and reaping the benefits of our trade agreements. And of course, we are partnering closely with Indonesia as the 2022 G20 president. That presidency will come at an absolutely critical time in the world's economic recovery from this pandemic. It occupied some part of our discussion today for that very reason. Finally, I want to touch on an area that I think lends particularly special credence to our relationship. That is the values that we share. We are proud democratic countries and therefore have much common ground in the way we engage and deal with challenges and opportunities. We approach our respective foreign policies from the standpoint of inclusion and cooperation. That means that we are proud of our democratic systems, but do not seek to impose or export them. We work with democracies and traditional partners, as well as those with different political systems who share our interests. And we seek to exercise smart diplomacy, understanding the viewpoints and concerns of our counterparts and finding innovative ways to align interests. That's part of what makes Indonesia and Australia effective and influential globally and regionally. It's also an approach that my Prime Minister and I are committed to continuing. That includes working together to stand up for the rights of women and girls in our region and indeed further afield. It includes our engagement with major powers and our advocacy of a durable regional strategic balance. It means working together to support a level playing field and protecting the rules and norms that guide engagement between all countries. And it means our shared support for and engagement with the most important piece of our regional architecture, ASEAN. We've seen ASEAN seek a resolution to the crisis in Myanmar since the coup in February. I want to recognise Indonesia's leadership within ASEAN, including its important role at the Special ASEAN Leaders Meeting on Myanmar in April here in Jakarta. Australia will continue to use our voice to strongly advocate for the ASEAN Special Envoy to be given appropriate access in Myanmar with all parties to deliver a way forward. We also look forward to working closely with Indonesia as ASEAN Chair in 2023 to advance the mutual interests that we share and of which I have spoken. Friends, it is my firm belief that this is a natural, long-term partnership to which Australia is deeply committed. Our cooperation matters to each of our countries, and our commitment to engagement and practical action is fundamental to building a more secure and prosperous region. Our visit to Jakarta this week does indeed come at a challenging time for both of our countries. But I think there is also cause for cautious optimism about the future. COVID-19 has shown that even in our darkest hours, we can find strength through our partnerships. The rapid deployment of vaccines globally has shown us the extraordinary power of human endeavour and innovation. We know there is more to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, the Australia-Indonesian partnership is in strong shape. We have a busy agenda ahead of us, and I'm delighted to be in Jakarta to once again take this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Foreign Minister Marise Payne, for your important messages about Indonesia-Australia bilateral relations, about ASEAN centrality, and about the Indo-Pacific. Especially want to highlight the part on how our bilateral relationship has changed, because just to remind the audience, the Indonesian audience, that in the first 60 years of Indonesia-Australia relations, 60 years, there was only 2 presidential visits to Australia. You think about it, 60 years, 2 presidential visits, right? And one of them was not even to Canberra, right? So now the visits happen very regularly, and I'm told also President Jokowi and Prime Minister Scott Morrison talks on the phone a lot. And obviously there's this 2+2 ministerial mechanism, one of the very few that Indonesia has in terms of its foreign policy practice. So the relationship has come a long way, has changed a lot, and the texture has changed, the pace has changed, the way of interaction has changed. And this is why they call it a comprehensive and strategic partnership. So thank you, Minister Marise, for your important messages. Let me ask you several questions now based on your speech. The first one is about the Quad, and Australia is a member of the Quad that consists of Australia, Japan, United States, and India. And since the advent of the Biden administration, the Quad has in fact become more active and has been elevated to the leaders level, right? And in this part of the world, especially Indonesia, we are curious to see this development of the Quad. And the question I want to ask you is, in Australia's view, what would be the proper relationship between between the Quad and ASEAN? Because the relationship has not been defined by both sides. Yeah, apart from the fact that Quad has openly said that they endorse ASEAN centrality. Yeah, but moving forward, what would be that proper relationship be, and would you favor a regular meeting between ASEAN and the Quad, for example, as has been uttered or suggested by some circles?
Thank you, Dino. And I think it is an important question, but also important to have preceded it with your comments about the changes in the development of the Australia-Indonesia relationship. You talked about texture, you talked about pace, you talked about our way of interaction changing. And I think they are all very appropriate words for a significant maturing of a relationship. I'm happy to say publicly that I've been in the Australian Parliament for over 2 decades. And the changes that I have seen as someone who came to the Parliament with a strong, passionate interest in foreign policy and international relations and security, defence, in my DNA really, I've watched those changes and they really are so powerful. And I think a mature Australia-Indonesia relationship appreciates developments in both informal and formal architecture, security architecture and diplomatic architecture. And I would describe the Quad as being a diplomatic network of like-minded democracies that are committed in our actions to support an open, resilient and inclusive Indo-Pacific. And it is certainly now a key pillar of Australia's international engagement. And I think also as the peaks and troughs of strategic competition buffet other participants in the region, these sorts of groupings have come to the fore. And I've also seen that during COVID-19. At the last Quad leaders meeting, the 3 key issues on which the leaders concentrated, and as you say, Dino, also the first Quad leaders meeting, the 3 key issues on which they concentrated were vaccines in the Indo-Pacific, climate issues in the Indo-Pacific, and critical technology. It's one of the biggest challenges of our lifetime, and how we protect and develop critical technology. And we regard that as a very positive and practical agenda to support regional partners in terms of their response to the major challenges of the period. And you're also right that the Quad partners all champion ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific explicitly and openly. I'm not necessarily sure that formal meetings between the Quad and ASEAN, for example, are required. The important thing, I think, is for Quad countries to show ASEAN and all groups and all countries, including the Pacific as well, for example, that the association, the diplomatic network, is a positive force for good in the region, focused on those issues of health and economic recovery, working in partnership with others so that we're able to assist all nations to be safe and secure and prosperous and, frankly, also sovereign. To date, the Quad, for example, does not and has not held meetings with other regional or international groupings. And all Quad partners, I think as dialogue partners with ASEAN, have pre-existing institutional engagement with ASEAN as well. The vaccine partnership, that's a really excellent example of this practical action, working together to support vaccination programs across the Indo-Pacific, and that includes in Southeast Asia, obviously. So there is that sort of basis for cooperation. So I think your question is a really interesting one, but at this point in time, I would say that there are enough existing structures and relationships that keep all of the Quad partners very close to ASEAN and to our closest friends in ASEAN, like Indonesia.
Thank you. Thank you. And Minister Marise, I'm obliged also to inform you that based on our conversations with students and academia in Indonesia, I think the Quad needs to be sensitive about avoiding the impression that it is heading towards hard power geopolitics, right? So long as the Quad projects more an image about soft power, smart power, and less so about hard powers, I think that is reassuring to FPCI and our community. But the next question I want to ask is about Afghanistan, and obviously that's the news of the day, the big news of the day. A lot of them are taken by surprise by what has happened there, and there are also some worries about what will that mean to regional affairs. I should point out that Indonesia some years ago was Afghanistan some years ago was a blind spot for Indonesia, in the sense that we had fighters going there, and at some point they became terrorist cells, and we saw the impact in terms of the Bali bomb and so on, right? But when those things were happening, the fighting in Afghanistan, those were not visibly seen by us. We felt the impact later on. So obviously there's a lot of consternation in Indonesia about what will happen. The public view so far is that we are giving them the benefit of the doubt, that today's Talibans are different than the Talibans 20 years ago, and we are listening to their statement that they will not pick fights with anybody in the region and so on. But what are your worries about the unfolding events in Afghanistan? And because Afghanistan is definitely part of the Indo-Pacific, how do you think the recent events will impact the dynamics in the Indo-Pacific?
Thanks, Dino. And can I also just very briefly add to my earlier response based on your additional comment about the perspectives that may be held of the Quad. You particularly mentioned the points of view of students, and I really appreciate you raising that and appreciate their perspective on this. That's why I think it's important to look at the relationships that exist bilaterally between Quad partners and the Quad itself quite separately, discreetly. They are very different things. And so there will be in the bilateral relationships, whether it's between Australia and Japan, United States and Japan, Australia and India, Japan and India, in those bilateral relationships, there will always be the strongest aspects of the security issues that you raise. Hard power, as you put it, particularly in defence and national security arenas, they will always be part of those relationships. And that's as it should be, and that's where those issues are overwhelmingly prosecuted. But I do think the focus that you have seen, the world has seen, from the Quad leaders, from Quad foreign ministers, and I've been part of 3 Quad foreign ministers meetings in the last few years, both in person and 2 in person, 1 virtually because of COVID. That focus on issues like vaccine access, issues like climate change and addressing that in our region, issues like critical technology, they are very much the focus of a diplomatic network, which, as I said, is committed to acting to support a very open and resilient and inclusive Indo-Pacific. So I appreciate you very much, Dino, raising that. In relation to Afghanistan, I'd like to say it's hard to know where to start, but there are so many issues. And this is such a deeply distressing time for the very many people in Afghanistan who had, I think, through the last 20 years, notwithstanding many of the challenges of that time, had seen a different life, had seen a life where the sorts of women and girls that I can see on this screen participating in this open, quite heady debate in terms of foreign policy and national security and international security issues where women and girls who wanted to do that had the opportunity to do so, had the opportunity for education, had the opportunity, it's very, very relevant in Australia at the moment, to play sport, something so many take for granted around the world. And so what the changes in Afghanistan mean is deeply distressing for those people, for their families, and for so many vulnerable people in Afghanistan as well. And Indonesia and Australia both participated in the expatriation of citizens, visa holders, permanent residents in our case, from Afghanistan in those very, very challenging 2 weeks. And I want to acknowledge Indonesia's effort in that regard. So our concerns are very significant about the situation in Afghanistan. We are acutely conscious of what happened the last time Afghanistan was under Taliban rule and how they've administered the territories they've controlled since as well. We know that there's a severe humanitarian crisis on the doorstep in Afghanistan and in fact already in existence both from the ongoing drought and the security situation. It is literally impacting directly on millions of people in Afghanistan and in regional countries, and enormous potential for both the security and humanitarian situation to deteriorate even further as we look at events unfolding. That will have significant implications for regional and international security, including in terms of terrorism, people smuggling, narcotics issues, and the question of human rights, particularly for women and girls. I want to again take this opportunity to acknowledge the leadership role that has been played by Indonesia, and particularly Foreign Minister Marsudi and her engagement with Afghan women and girls in particular, her active engagement has been most warmly received. Our counter-terrorism cooperation between Australia and Indonesia, forged in the aftermath of some of the most critical events of our shared history, is now once again critical. And I cannot reinforce that enough. That cooperation, that commitment to regional partnership that has been sustained over so many years, we must continue to deepen that cooperation. We cannot allow Afghanistan to be a breeding ground or a training ground for terrorism ever again. Not as an international community, not as individual nations, and not as a region which has seen more than our fair share of the outcomes of that sort of terrorism activity in the past. Here in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, and of course Australia's engagement, the impact on Australia from some of those events is well known. So we have to make it very clear that an extremist narrative of success in Afghanistan is not one which we're prepared to accept, and make it very clear to the caretaker, to the Taliban regime that has just installed a range of leaders, that it must prevent that return to violent extremism, and that it has to be very aware that the world is watching. We are also alert to the potential for irregular people movement. And again, Indonesia has been on that front line before. And illegal people smugglers supporting the potential influx of refugees is something we are both very alert to. And we're committed to continuing to work with Indonesia and other regional countries to address this. In relation to the officials that have taken positions in the regime in Afghanistan, I would note that it is not representative of society. It's not representative of minorities, including Hazara and other ethnic minorities. It contains no women. It contains members of the Haqqani network. So these are issues which we view very seriously. We'll continue to work with Indonesia and other international partners to hold the Taliban to account for their commitments, for their words, which need to be met by actions. They've asked for respect. Well, in my book, respect is something that you have to earn.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, I wonder if you can take one more question. I know you have a busy day today, but it's about the Indo-Pacific. And as you know, it's a relatively new regional concept, and there are different labels attached to it. Australia, Japan, and India, and United States call it a free and open Indo-Pacific, right? And there are other versions as well. For Indonesia, we use the term free and open, but we also use the term cooperation. I think our definition on Indo-Pacific stresses more on the cooperation part, more so than any other labels, right? And let's call a spade, which is if we talk about geopolitical rivalries in the region, it is really about Russia or China on one side and a host of countries on the other side, including the Quad countries, right? So there is geopolitical rivalries, competition going on. And my question is, you spoke about cooperation, and Indonesia also stresses the cooperative part of Indo-Pacific, right? But not many people are convinced that when the Quad speaks about cooperation, that extends to China and Russia, and that can be realized in a very concrete policy areas of cooperation. In other words, so far it's just at the rhetorical level and not much substance to it, because the reality on the ground is there's really not much substantive practical cooperation either way between the Quad and Russia or China. Can you elaborate on that?
Can I say, to start with, Dino, that Australia stands absolutely ready to cooperate on what I think are a set of pretty reasonable principles of openness, of transparency, of respect for countries no matter their size, of not using coercion as a tool of engagement. On all of those values and principles, we stand absolutely ready to cooperate. And in fact, I would go so far as to say, from our perspective, that our vision for the Indo-Pacific, which, as I've said in my remarks, as you mentioned, is of an open and inclusive and a resilient region that is underpinned by the rules and the norms that have given us the opportunities and the freedoms, the economic growth, the lifting of people out of poverty that we have seen over countless decades, and also respect for sovereignty. And cooperation, as I said, is central to that. And we would point out that in just a relatively short period of time, and also right through COVID, one of the things that Australia has tried to do across the region is to grow and to develop relationships based on those principles. We've signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Malaysia in January of this year, with India in June of last year, a strategic partnership with Thailand in November of 2020, and a comprehensive strategic and economic partnership with Papua New Guinea in August of 2020. And again, I would say, working really hard on the development of those relationships right through COVID, right through a pandemic. And we actually have warmly welcomed increasing global attention to the Indo-Pacific, and that includes ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific. And as I said, our recognition of those four key priorities that ASEAN identifies of connectivity, of the SDGs and others, we're very much in the same space on those issues. But also the European Union, France, Germany, India, Japan, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom and the United States, all very overtly engaged on these issues. And because the Indo-Pacific is Australia's neighbourhood and Indonesia's neighbourhood, and the world's most consequential region, it's a place where Australia lives and works, operates, engages, where we have the opportunity to engage, to make the most meaningful impact. You can't do that without cooperation. So that's at the forefront of this. It's why we are able to work together on COVID economic recovery, on COVID health security, and what the future looks like in a post-pandemic environment. But we have to be clear that there are certain lines that it's actually not acceptable to cross. Let's start with cyber interference and disinformation, both of which are dangerous and deadly in a pandemic. Let's just start there. Let's start with territorial claims that the countries of ASEAN are grappling with every single day, knowing that their rights and their obligations are underpinned by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, a rule body that Australia accepts, and that every member of ASEAN accepts, and that every responsible nation in the Indo-Pacific accepts. The challenge of strategic competition, where the Indo-Pacific, of course, finds itself at the epicentre, is not one that we underestimate. And I don't think anyone engaging on this particular discussion with FPCI underestimates the challenge of strategic competition. And in our view, it is vital that we compete to preserve the international order that has underpinned those decades of stability and prosperity that I spoke about in the Indo-Pacific. But it's not in our interests for competition to slip into confrontation or outright conflict. And that is something which Australia is very clear about.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Marise Payne, for your comprehensive and frank remarks. Talking about the future of strategic competition and cooperation in the region, I remember what Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, said to Naomi Osaka when she asked for what is the key to my success in the future. Kobe Bryant said one word: craft, right? Craft, which is imagination, efforts, right? Perseverance, right? And we, the people of Indo-Pacific, trust our leaders, including you, to have the right imagination and the right craft to ensure that the future of our region is not zero-sum strategic rivalry, but more win-win cooperation, because that's what we've done in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, how we manage competition, conflict, and cooperation, and turn ASEAN into an oasis of stability that we are today. So we count on you, and we thank you for being with us today. Minister Marise Payne, you're always welcome in Indonesia. You're a true and good friend of Indonesia. And I want to give you another gift, which is another pantun. So let's go for it. I went to the market that's right near here. Bought a mango, apple, and papaya. Two countries far away, but always near. All the best for Indonesia, Australia. All right. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey to India. And we hope to see you again. And by the way, FPCI has been very happy with our cooperation with your embassy and with your government. We have a lot of programs that has been supported by your embassy and your government. So thank you for your friendship. And there are many students who are involved with your embassies. So thank you.
Thank you, Dino, and thank you to everyone who has joined this evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.